In September of 1325, a fortress called Monteveglio was handed to the enemy from the inside. It belonged to Bologna. It was given to Modena. That is why two Italian cities went to war. You have never heard it that way, because somebody found a better sentence. Here is the better sentence, and every word of it was copied from the word before it. Soldiers stole a bucket. 30,000 men marched. 5,000 held them off. 2,000 died. And the bucket is still there. I count 5 claims in it. The record confirms 1. The 4 that fail are the more interesting ones. And they fail in the same direction. Most of the people who told you this copied the last person who told it. Not one of them checked all of it. None of the 4 failed because the story is 700 years old. They failed because repeating it was easier than checking it, and the checking takes about an hour. Claim 1 is the bucket, and the bucket is innocent. Bologna and Modena were on opposite sides of the great argument of medieval Italy. The Pope had Bologna, the Emperor had Modena, and this war was one episode in it. The record calls that struggle a fight of over 300 years. So when a Bolognese fortress changed hands in September, that was not a surprise. It was the next move in something very long. The record's word for the men who handed it over is malcontents, and the record does not say who they were. And the bucket? Here is the sentence the whole legend is built on. Some accounts state that the men of Modena took a bucket from a well just outside a city gate as a trophy. Some accounts state that. That is the strength of the evidence for the bucket. Not that it started the war, that it was taken at all. Every version you have heard has the order backwards. The bucket is not the cause. The bucket is the receipt. Which is a far worse story, and that is exactly why it lost. Now the armies. One source is the page nearly everyone checks first. Hold on to that, because we're coming back to it, and it is going to be embarrassing. That page puts Bologna at 32,000 men, and Modena at 7,000, under a commander it names as Bonacolsi. Now go and read the retellings. One says 30,000 foot soldiers and 2,000 cavalry. Add those together and you get the record's 32,000. And that teller never once says so. The other two give you one number and no cavalry at all, 30,000 and over 30,000. Then there is Modena, and not every teller bothers to give a figure at all. Of the ones that do, 2 say 7,000, which is the record's. One says 5,000 and calls it outnumbered 6-1. And I want to be fair about the 6. It is not invented. 30,000 divided by 5,000 is exactly 6. Correct arithmetic on a number that is wrong. Run the record's figures instead and you get about 4.5 to 1. Bologna raised 32,000 men. That is not a raid. That is a city marching out of its own gates in November because a fortress had been lost. Somebody looked at the size of that and decided it was worth doing. At no point in that chain of command did anyone say, "Hang on, are we sure?" They met at Zappolino in November. The record gives it one line. The Bolognese were routed and fled into the walls of their city. The smaller army won, with less than a quarter of the force. The outcome is the one thing in this story nobody disputes. It is also the thing nobody leads with, because a bucket is a better headline than a rout. Claim 4. 2,000 died. November 1325. A field in Bolognese country and 2 lines of men who had been handed a spear that autumn and told where to stand. The page everybody checks says, in its own text, that about 2,000 men were killed on both sides. And in the box beside that text, on the same page, it puts Bologna's losses at about 2,500 killed or wounded and Modena's at about 500. 2,000 and 3,000. One page, one afternoon. I am not going to pretend to know which figure is right. What the record can tell you is that the men in that field stopped being men and became a figure, and then around a figure. This is not two historians arguing across a library. It is one page disagreeing with itself in two places about one afternoon. Nothing on that page reconciles the two figures. Nothing flags them. They sit a few inches apart, and nothing on the page has ever reconciled them. And now I have to say the uncomfortable part out loud. That page is the page I've been quoting to you all episode. 32,000 came from it. 7,000 came from it. Bonacolsi came from it. It is the page nearly everyone checks first, including me, and it cannot tell you how many men died in the field it describes. So how did a fortress become a bucket? In 1622, a poet named Alessandro Tassoni published a mock heroic epic called The Stolen Bucket. 12 cantos. Very funny. On purpose. It takes the war and hangs the whole thing on the theft of a wooden pail. Now, the honest version of this. Tassoni did not invent that story. The record says he made use of a tradition that was already circulating. People already told it that way, and he took the story and made it permanent. That distinction matters, and I nearly got it wrong myself. One account says the bucket's role was codified in the 17th century, and codified is not the same word as invented. The poem is not the author of the story. It is the reason the story is still standing. And he kept working on it. He revised it in 1624 and again in 1630. 400 years later, the shape he gave it is the shape you got, and the fortress is the part that fell out. And look at what that did to the story's shelf life. A border quarrel between two Italian cities in 1325 is, for most of the world, not a story at all. A 12-canto comedy about a stolen pail is a story anywhere. The poem is the reason you have heard of Zappolino. It is also the reason you have heard of it wrong. Which leaves the bucket. Claim 5. This one is true, and it is the only one. The bucket is real, and it is in Modena in a case 700 years after the afternoon it is named for. And it is not a grand object. It is a bucket. Wood and iron. The kind of thing that hung on a rope over a well. And nothing about it is worth a war. And that is worth a second of your time. Of the 5 things this story tells you, the only one that survived contact with the record is the object. Not the cause, not the armies, not the toll, the pail. Which is the whole shape of this entry. The cause got copied into a bucket. The armies got copied into rounder numbers. The dead got copied into a total that disagrees with itself. And the joke got copied into a fact. A bucket started it. A fortress did. 30,000. The record says 32. 5,006 to 1. The record says 7,000 and about 4.5. 2,000 dead. The same page also says 3. Only the bucket survived. Entry number 3. 5 in, 1 out. Filed under a bucket. One last thing. If you go to Modena and look up at the tower, you will see it hanging there on its chain. Exactly as promised. That one is a copy. The original is across the square in the town hall, in a case, in a room most visitors walk straight past. And the picture in the encyclopedia article is a picture of the copy. 700 years of copying, and the last thing to get copied was the bucket. In the next entry, the record and the legend disagree again. The legend, unfortunately, is the one you already believe. Subscribe and the Almanac stays open. The next one is on your screen now.